What's up, guys? This is Coach Grant with First Down Training, and today we're going to be talking about how quarterbacks can get a perfect throwing motion. So we're going to talk about everything all the way from top to bottom. We're going to talk about the grip that quarterbacks need to have, how they should take back the football, proper hip mechanics, and how you guys can be more accurate because of your throwing mechanics. Let's get started. All right, fellas, let's get started with the grip. So what should be, like, I guess you could say, the optimal grip for quarterbacks? A lot of quarterbacks grip the ball a different way. If you have success gripping the ball like a certain way that might be different than what I recommend here, you could stick with that grip, but generally this is the grip that I've seen most quarterbacks have the most success with, especially those that struggle spinning the ball. You make one tweak to their grip, and then all of a sudden they start spinning it a little bit better. So the first things first, when you're gripping the ball, you don't want your palm all over the ball. I know we've all probably seen that video of Patrick Mahomes talking about how he grips the ball with his palm on it. Fact of the matter is, we're not Patrick Mahomes, so at the end of the day, most quarterbacks can't do that successfully, right? When you have your palm all over the ball, sometimes it can cause your wrist to be a little bit like bent inward when you throw. Maybe you curve the ball more, your wrist breaks. It's just not the best position to be in. Where you want to be is you want to have a slight pocket of air between your palm and the football. What I always say is grip the ball like normally you can put your palm on it, but put a finger between your palm and the football, and that gap right there is where you ultimately want to be. It helps us with spin, and it helps us keep a more stable wrist. Now, secondly, the ring finger should be on the second thread. So not the first thread, because then your hand's going to be too high, it's hard to grip. Not the third thread, because then your hand's going to be too low, you're grabbing the fat of the ball. Right on the second thread. And your index finger, this last but not least, should apply a little bit more pressure to the ball, because your index finger is your spiral finger, and that's what helps us get the proper flick. So if you can work on those elements of your grip, I think you'll be a lot more consistent with spinning the ball, but obviously there's a lot more that goes into having a perfect throwing motion that we're going to talk about next. Now let's talk about where you should hold the ball, fellas. Now, I think a lot of older school coaches used to teach like, oh, hold the ball up by your ear so you could just go up and over. But honestly, when you're holding that ball up by your ear, at least as me personally, and I'm sure a lot of you could relate to this, I feel very, very tense in my traps and my shoulders, and it feels like I don't have much range of motion, and you never want to be tense when you throw. You want to be relaxed so you get as much range of motion as possible with your upper body so you could rotate your shoulders. We'll talk about why that's important later on in this video. And you want to be generating as much power and force as possible from your legs, but if you're super tense up here, you're not allowing yourself to rotate and get force. Now, what I will say is you don't want to hold the ball super low, because when you hold the ball really low, it's a longer process of a throw. Your release is a little bit slower, and obviously as a quarterback, we need to have a quicker release. The best position to be in my opinion, I don't like it when quarterbacks have their front shoulder loaded. I want you to stay relaxed. Center of your chest or slightly on your right pec. That's where you want to be. Center, slightly to the right, but nice and relaxed so we can get full range of motion. The ball's not dropping too low, so my release speed can be on point, but I'm also relaxed enough to get the most out of my throw. Now, fellas, before we get to the rest of this video, if you are a quarterback watching this or a wide receiver and you would like to train with myself and my staff of coaches this offseason, we're going to be traveling out to 15 different cities across the entire U.S. for 2-day-long QB and wide receiver training camps. So guys, if you want some more information, how you can sign up, go to that very first link in the description below. That's where you can get all the details on how you can get your spot. We limit spots for these camps simply because we want to be able to work with each athlete individually and on an individual level, and we can't do that if there's a million people there because we need to go fast, we're on a time schedule, and it's just not the best environment for you to develop. The goal of this is to help you develop as an athlete. So fellas, the next camp is going to be in San Francisco, California. They'll be heading out to Orlando, Florida, Phoenix, Arizona, Columbia, South Carolina. They'll be heading out to Seattle, Washington, Oklahoma City, Oklahoma, Nashville, Tennessee, Milwaukee, Wisconsin, Austin, Texas, Atlanta, Georgia, Columbus, Ohio, Boston, Massachusetts, Salt Lake City, Utah, and finishing it off in Los Angeles, California. So guys, make sure you get your spot. We have available spots, but they will sell out. So again, very first link in that description below. Let's get back to this video. So now, fellas, that we talked about the grip, talked about how you should hold the ball as a quarterback. Let's talk about your base, and let's talk about your hip and shoulder sequence, if you will. So the goal as a quarterback always is to be able to throw with as much power, if the throw requires it, as much power, as much distance, as much velocity as possible, or with touch, as much touch as possible. Obviously, there are different types of throws as a quarterback, but also maintaining arm health, or at least you could say, like, I would say keeping your arm, like not using your arm solely on the throw. That's where a lot of quarterbacks go wrong. They think like throwing with arm strength, throwing with power is all about the arm. How fast can their arm move? That's actually not the case, you guys. When it comes down to throwing with velocity, but taking pressure and stress off your arm, it's all about your shoulder, your hip sequence, and your base. So that's what we're going to be breaking down for you right here. This is probably the most important thing that I think really any quarterback at any level, if you guys can get this down, you will be a more efficient passer. So it starts with the base, right? So you want to be in a base where you're about 70% on your back leg, 30% on your front leg. I call it being stacked in a skyscraper. So you should think your head, your knee, and your foot on your throwing side, so I'm a righty, so that would be my right side, is stacked on top of each other. And it's not a knee bend, you're not squatting down, it's more of a shift back. You want to stay nice and tall, head, knee, and foot are stacked on top of each other. Now, this is where you want to get to a position called dissociation, which means your shoulders go this way as your stride goes towards the target. Essentially, it means separation. Dissociation is a fancy word for separation. But separation is how we create torque as a quarterback, because you want your hips to sling the upper half through just like a baseball swing. For those of you that play baseball, think of throwing a football just like how you would hit a baseball. You're in your batter's stance, step to the pitcher, you keep the bat back here, and then what do? You squish the back bug, hip is turning, bat's behind, and that's how we get more power on my swing. Same thing as a quarterback, you guys. So you're here, weights back, nice and light on your front foot. You want to take about a 6-inch stride. That's the goal. Anything longer than 6 inches would be considered an overstride. Anything shorter than 6 inches would be considered too short of a stride, and guys like to pop up when they do that. They can't support their weight when their stride goes negative, right? So what you want to do, weight stays back. 6-inch stride, but you're not leaving that stacked position, because that allows you to rotate and separate with your hands back here. A lot of QBs, when they stride, they push forward. I can't rotate my shoulders back, so my hip, knee, foot get left behind. And when those are left behind, when I throw, my elbow and shoulder are ahead of my hip at the release, which is what puts pressure on the arm. We do not want to be a linear thrower. We want to be a rotational thrower. But the rotation needs to happen at the right time. I see a lot of quarterbacks, what they'll do is they rotate as they stride, but the same thing's going to happen, you guys. Your shoulders and your hips are opening, you're pushing the ball. We're not having my hips fire before the shoulder and the ball. That's called torque, right? So you got to keep your weight back to achieve that. So you're here, you stride, shoulders rotate back slightly. Remember, we talked about that's why it's important you're not tense, because you can't really do that. If you're relaxed, you could do that. Keep your weight back. Then we're thinking like somebody's got their hands on the front of my shorts and they're pulling me this way. Pulling the front hip, because that will make your back hip go. You want to try to pivot your back foot the best you can. Some guys like to drag, that's cool. Some guys like to pivot, that's fine too as well. Just don't do this and don't pick it up. Anything where you stay connected and you're able to rotate, and then we finish through on the throw. So if you can achieve that sequence, you'll be a much more efficient passer, you'll have more velocity, you'll have more distance, and it takes pressure off the arm. Now fellas, everything that we just discussed, ball carriage, sequence, hips, finish on the throw, all that is important. But if you can't throw the ball accurately, none of it's important, right? So there are a couple key things after your hips decide to fire through that are like the icing on the cake to help you be a more accurate passer. So the first thing I want to talk about is staying square. That means your hips and your shoulders need to stay parallel to where you want the ball to go. Does it need to be perfectly parallel? No, but the best you possibly can. So if I'm throwing to the camera right here, I stay back, I delay. When my hips fire through, I don't want my front shoulder being wild with my hips, even if I stay back initially, because that's called over-rotating. And what's going to happen is whatever your front side does, your throwing arm kind of does something similar, right? But in like almost the opposite direction, if that makes sense. Like if you drop your elbow, I think everybody probably knows that you don't want your hand down here, but when you drop your elbow, your release goes the opposite way. That's why they teach quarterbacks to keep their hand up by their chest, up by their mouth. I say eat the sandwich, because your release won't be overly high and you won't miss high. Now, a lot of guys don't talk about the front side. This front side pulls this way, so what happens is that your arm goes the opposite way and you're coming across, which causes you to miss behind or too far in front of guys. So you want to try to stay parallel. Hips and shoulders the best you can parallel to the target, because that keeps your release inside your frame. And the reason why we want to stay inside my frame is so I can do something called extension, which essentially means when I release, I want my wrist, elbow, shoulder extended in a line towards the target. That's that wrist flick. That's where you get that accuracy from. So you could have a perfect hip sequence, but if you shorten the arm, if you're widening out and your arm's coming across, we're not going to be accurate, you guys. Eat the sandwich, hips and shoulders parallel, and make sure we extend, and that will be the icing on the cake with your entire throwing motion.